What would you do if you spent months risking everything, your career, your safety, your name, to expose the truth, only to find out that the person who destroyed it all was sitting right across from you at your own dinner table? What would you do if the one person who was supposed to protect you was the one who handed you over? Could you ever look at your brother the same way again? Chloe Merritt was 28 years old, and she had always believed in two things above everything else: the truth and her family. She grew up in Clover Falls, a small town in western Ohio where everybody knew everybody, where the diner on Main Street still had the same menu from 1987, and where your last name followed you like a shadow. The Merritt family wasn't rich or famous, but they were known for being straight, for being loyal, for showing up when things got hard. Chloe was the youngest of two. Her brother Derek was 6 years older, tall, charming, always the one who made people laugh at the dinner table. Growing up, Chloe had looked up to him the way younger siblings do. He felt like a wall between her and the world. Safe. Solid. Their dad had passed away when Chloe was 16. After that, it was just the three of them, Chloe, Derek, and their mom Patricia, who worked double shifts at the county hospital for years to keep the lights on. Chloe watched her mother pour herself out for the family without complaint, and that became the thing that shaped her most. She decided early on that she would spend her life telling the stories that people tried to bury. She would be the voice for people who had no platform, no power, no protection. So she became a journalist. She studied at Ohio State, graduated with honors, and moved back to Clover Falls to work at a regional news outlet called the Central Ohio Dispatch. It wasn't the New York Times. It wasn't a glamorous career with a corner office and a national byline. But it was real. And real was enough for Chloe. She was the kind of reporter who stayed late, who double-checked every source, who drove 2 hours for a 20-minute interview because she believed every story deserved to be told properly. Her colleagues respected her. Her editor, a gruff but fair man named Bill Harmon, once told her she had the best instincts in the newsroom. Coming from Bill, that meant everything. Chloe rented a small apartment above a bookstore on Elm Street. She had a cat named Pepper, a coffee maker she treated like a family member, and a corkboard above her desk covered in notes, photographs, and red string. She didn't have a lot, but she had purpose. And for someone like Chloe, purpose was everything. The investigation started 8 months before everything fell apart. A woman named Renee Dalton had walked into the dispatch office on a Tuesday afternoon, hands shaking, eyes red from crying. She said her husband had been wrongfully fired from Hartwell Industries, the largest private employer in Clover Falls, after he reported a chemical dumping violation near the town's water supply. She said he wasn't the only one. There were others. Workers who had raised concerns and been quietly pushed out, their reputations damaged before they could speak publicly. Chloe listened to Renee for 2 hours. She took 7 pages of notes. Bill told her to be careful. Hartwell Industries was powerful. They had lawyers on retainer and connections that ran deep into county government. You find something solid, he said. You bring it to me first. Nothing goes anywhere without me seeing it. Chloe agreed. And then she went to work. For 4 months she built the story piece by piece. She interviewed 11 former employees, all off the record. She filed public records requests. She drove out to the contamination site 3 times with a photographer named Jess, who documented everything with quiet precision. She obtained internal memos through a source she protected fiercely, a current Hartwell employee who was terrified but willing. That source had a family, kids in school, a mortgage. They trusted Chloe with their safety. She didn't take that lightly, not even for a second. She kept everything in 2 places, a locked drawer in her desk at the dispatch, and an encrypted folder on her personal laptop. She told no one the details. Not Jess, not Bill, not her mother, but she told Derek. That was the mistake that cost her everything. It wasn't planned. It was a Sunday dinner at her mom's house, mashed potatoes and roast chicken. The kind of meal that made Clover Falls feel like the whole world. Derek was in a good mood, funny, charming as always. He asked about work. Chloe was tired and proud, and she wanted just once to share something with her brother that felt important. She told him she was working on a big story. She told him it involved Hartwell. She told him it was going to change things in the town, that people were going to finally be held accountable. She didn't give him names. She didn't give him documents. But she gave him enough. Derek nodded, said he was proud of her. Passed the rolls. 3 weeks later, Chloe's source went silent. She noticed it first as an absence, missed calls, unanswered texts. Then she got a message through a private channel they had set up. They know. I don't know how. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Chloe sat in her car in the dispatch parking lot for a long time after reading that. Then it got worse. Someone had sent an anonymous tip to Hartwell's legal team. Not just that an investigation was underway, but specific details. The names of 2 employees Chloe had interviewed. The nature of the internal documents. The fact that she had visited the contamination site. Information that could only have come from someone she had spoken to directly. Hartwell's lawyers moved fast. Within a week, the 2 named employees received legal letters. One of them panicked and signed a non-disclosure agreement within 48 hours. The other called Chloe crying, saying her husband had been contacted at his separate job. A form of pressure so deliberate it made Chloe's stomach turn. Bill called Chloe into his office. He looked tired. The story's been compromised, he said. I can't run something this damaged. We'd be handing them the lawsuit of the decade. Chloe argued. She pushed back. She said the facts were still solid, that the contamination evidence was real, that people's health was at risk. But without protected sources, without the internal documentation that was now legally contested, the story collapsed. Bill killed it. And 3 days later, citing a pattern of reckless handling of sensitive materials, the dispatch let Chloe go. She drove home in silence. She sat in her apartment above the bookstore and stared at the corkboard and felt the kind of hollow that goes all the way to the bone. She had been burned. She had been burned deliberately. And an innocent family, the source who trusted her, was now living in fear because of a leak she never saw coming. She started over the way she always did. From the beginning. She wasn't looking for the story anymore. She was looking for the leak. She made a list of everyone she had told anything to. The list was short. Jess, who knew about the site visits but nothing else. Bill, who knew the investigation existed but not the source details. And Derek. She sat with Derek's name for a long time. She didn't want it to be him. She told herself it couldn't be. This was her brother. The person who used to drive her home from school, who sat with her the night their father died, who called her every Sunday. She told herself she was being paranoid, that grief and loss were making her suspicious of the wrong person. But she was a journalist, and journalists follow the evidence. She started quietly. She asked around carefully, casually, about Derek's life in the months before the leak. She knew he worked in sales for a logistics company, that he traveled sometimes, that he had been a little tighter with money lately, though he'd never said why. Then a former colleague who'd left the dispatch for a position in Columbus mentioned something in passing. She said she'd heard through mutual connections that someone at Hartwell had been using a local contact to monitor local press activity. A middleman. Someone with no obvious connection to the company. Chloe asked her how she knew. I saw a payment record, the woman said. I wasn't supposed to. It was a name I didn't recognize. Merritt. The room went quiet inside Chloe's chest. She didn't confront him right away. She needed proof. Real proof. The kind that couldn't be explained away with charm and a reasonable-sounding excuse. She went back to basics. She filed a request for financial records through a source she trusted at a small legal firm. Someone who had helped her on a previous story. She cross-referenced payment dates with the timeline of the leak. She pulled Derek's public-facing social media and noticed two things. A 3-day trip to Columbus he hadn't mentioned, taken the week after their Sunday dinner, and a new watch he was wearing in photos, the kind that ran about $2,000. She drove to Columbus. She sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks from the Hartwell regional office and she waited. On the 3rd day, she saw him walk out of the building with a man in a dark suit. They shook hands like they knew each other well. Chloe photographed it from across the street, hands completely steady, heart completely shattered. She drove home without turning on the radio. She didn't go to Bill. She didn't go to the police. She went to someone bigger. A contact she'd made at a state-level investigative outlet. A woman named Dana Park, known for breaking corporate corruption stories across Ohio. Chloe called her and said she had something that connected Hartwell Industries to a coordinated effort to suppress a contaminated water investigation and silence whistleblowers through intimidation. Dana listened. Then she said, "Send me what you have." Chloe sent everything. The memos, the contamination documentation, the financial trail connecting Derek to Hartwell, the photograph outside the Columbus office, the testimonies of the workers, which she had quietly resecured after explaining what had happened and letting them choose whether to come forward again. 3 of them said yes. Dana Park's outlet ran the story on a Thursday morning. By Friday, it was picked up by 2 national outlets. By the following Monday, the Ohio Attorney General's office announced an investigation into Hartwell Industries' waste disposal practices and its documented efforts to suppress employee complaints. Derek called Chloe that afternoon. She let it go to voicemail. His message was long. He said he needed money. He said he'd made a mistake. He said he didn't think it would go that far. He said she had to understand. She listened to it once. Then she forwarded it, along with everything else, to Dana Park and to the AG's office, where it was added to the growing file on Hartwell's network of paid intermediaries. 2 months later, Chloe was offered a position at a mid-size investigative outlet in Columbus. She accepted. She found an apartment with better light and a 2nd bedroom she turned into an office. Her mother called her the night before she moved. Patricia Merritt cried quietly on the phone, not because Derek had been named in the investigation, though that had broken something in her. She cried because of what Chloe had done despite it. "You didn't stop," her mother said, "even when it was him." "I couldn't," Chloe said. "Those people needed the story to be told." "I know," Patricia said. "Your father would have said the same thing." Chloe sat on the floor of her empty apartment, Pepper curled in her lap, the corkboard already taken down from the wall. She had lost her brother. Not to death, not to distance, but to a choice he made when he thought no one would ever find out. She didn't know if she would ever fully heal from that. She didn't know if the anger would soften into something more manageable, or if it would stay sharp like this forever. But the story was told. The people who needed protecting had been protected, late, imperfectly, but protected. The water tests came back 3 weeks after the AG announcement. The contamination was real. The town was real. The harm was real. And Chloe Merritt, who had always believed in the truth in her family, had learned the hardest version of a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. Sometimes the truth costs you the table you grew up eating at. But you tell it anyway. Because some things matter more than keeping the peace. And because the people sitting across that dinner table, they were counting on someone brave enough to say so.